Hello there and welcome to this Flutter Quick Start Guide. So if you couldn't tell by the title, this is going to be a quick start guide for Flutter. Duh. And yeah, so we're just going to be getting into the very basics of it, creating our very first application, going over exactly what it is, how it works, and things like that. Anyway, so the whole idea behind Flutter, we do have a what is Flutter and should you learn it video on Eduonix already, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but essentially Flutter is a competitor to Facebook's React Native from Google. So it's actually very, very similar. It's written in a different programming language called Dart, but it is so similar to JavaScript, it might as well be JavaScript, which it sort of is because it does compile to JavaScript. So yeah, it's very, very similar to JavaScript. I'm sorry, not Java. So yeah, so it's clearly they're clearly modeling it after React Native. I mean, they're not really trying to hide it all that much. So yeah. Anyway. So yes, that's what Flutter is. It provides, all the bells and whistles that React Native provides. Hot reloading. GPU acceleration, so you can use the actual GPU of the phone for animations and things like that, and so on and so on. So yeah, that's essentially the whole idea behind Flutter. Nothing too complex there. So anyway, without further ado, let's actually jump right in and install Flutter for ourselves. Alright, so here we are. We have Flutter installed. The zip file is installed. We can now go ahead and open this up. That's going to unzip. Alright, looking good. Let's give it a second here. Any day now. It's definitely working. Definitely moving along. Alright, and there we go. So now we have Flutter installed. We can go ahead and go into the folder. So here we have our actual Flutter itself. It's right there. So let's go ahead and open up our terminal. So this will of course be different if you're on a Windows machine. It's going to be CMD. Let's cd into this downloads folder. All right, so we can now see all of our files here. There we go. And now we're actually going to go ahead and set the system path to point to this Flutter folder here. So let's go and actually do that. So we're going to open up. We can actually just go right here. Where is it? We have update your path. This is actually what we're doing right now. We're updating the path. So we're going to go ahead and open up home bash profile. There we go. So we can just type open and then $home/.bash profile. Now remember, this will of course be different if you're on a Windows machine. And the Windows specific installation is back here. So if you go install Windows, it's going to be specifically for Windows as well. So you can see it there. Anyway, so let's go and open that up, and you'll see that I actually already have it configured. So yeah, right now it just points to users, and then our Synchronix, that's my user, downloads, Flutter, and then bin path. So that's just all you're going to do. You're going to replace this users or Synchronix downloads with the place that you actually installed Flutter. So that's, you're just going to make it point to this folder right here. There we go, simple as that. So in order to make sure that it's actually working, you need to close the previous one. You don't need to close it. Just create a new terminal window here. And now you just have to do Flutter. I think you have to just do Flutter, and that's going to go ahead and give you. If you did it incorrectly, then it's going to say command not found. But if you did it correctly, then you're going to go ahead and get this right here, which essentially just means that everything is installed correctly, and we can actually use Flutter. Okay, so Flutter has a very, very useful command line client here. We can go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see what I'm doing. A very useful command line client. We can actually see right here available commands. We have create, so we can create a new Flutter project. So let's do Flutter create, and let's just call this. Let's put this up here. My first app, something like that. I don't know, because that's just sort of what people do. All right, there we go. Right, we can't use that. There we go. That should do it. All right, nice. So it wrote 65 files. It's gonna go ahead and run the package get. You're gonna see what that means in a second here. Right, and there we go. So now everything is installed. We got all done. In order to run your application, type cd my first app Flutter run. So that's correct. So now let's actually go into Flutter. And we can now see here in packages, this is essentially what it was installing when it did, installing the package. So that's just, something to know. Anyway, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and cd into my first app. And we can actually now do Flutter run. Of course, it's actually not going to run anywhere. no connected devices, because we actually don't have any connected devices. Now, I could hook up my phone, but then I would have to, get the screen recording to work on that phone and then edit that together, and, I can't be bothered. So we're going to use that emulator. So let's install Android Studio. Let's open up Android Studio. There we go. All right, there we go. We have Android Studio open, so let's go ahead and create a new Android Studio project. All right, so it doesn't matter what we actually call all this. Let's just basic here. Doesn't really matter since we're just going to be using the emulator for it anyway. So yeah, let's go ahead and get that open. All right, there we go. We got our app open. All right, so now we actually just can go ahead and run this. Let's give it a test. There we go. Let's run this. I have a Nexus 5X emulator here. Let's open that up. All right, there we go. So here I have my emulator actually open now. Just got a very nice little dynamic wallpaper. Oddly enough, okay. That's weird. Anyway, oddly enough, I actually don't use Android when I actually am as my main smartphone. I use iOS pretty much exclusively, but then I develop pretty much mainly Android applications. So it's just kind of like that. Okay, so now let's actually go ahead and run our Flutter app again, Flutter Run, and now it should actually go ahead and run this on the our Android emulator. So let's give it a second to start up here. And there we go. So we actually went ahead and got this running. So now you'll see that on our emulator, it opened up Flutter demo homepage. And this is actually just an app here with, we can go and click plus. It's just going to show how many times we click the button. So that's, that's pretty cool. We can, exit the application. We can go back to it here. Where is it? Where is our application? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? There we go, my first app. All right, and there we go. So you can see it saves it. So everything's working correctly. We can take a look at the multitasking, things like that. It's still there. So yeah, so that's essentially just how that works. Okay. So now that we got that done, you can see here how we have to hot reload your app on the fly. Press R to restart the app entirely. Press capital R, Shift R. So that's essentially just the hot reloading at work. We're going to take a look at that in a second here. But first of all, let's take a look where this app code is located. So this is great that we actually have this app. But where is the code for this app located? Well, let's actually go to our Flutter folder here, to our Flutter project that it created. Okay, and of course I could close it. Let me open it back up again. All right, here we are. Here's my my first app folder. This is the app that we created, and we can actually now go ahead and into lib here, library. All right, and there we go. So here we have a main.dart, and it's showing it as a system file here, but it's actually a code file. So if we open this up with VS Code, Visual Studio, or you can just use any text editor you want. Yeah, there we go. Let's open that up with Visual Studio. It actually gave us the Flutter file and not, yeah, there we go. So it's a Dart file. And there we go. So this is the actual file that we have right now. All right, so now that we're here, we can actually go and actually install our Dart plugin in order for this to actually work. So I already have it installed, so everything's working for me right now. But you're going to go ahead and go to right here. You're going to not go to Explorer. You're going to go to this right here in Visual Studio Code. Now, you can get this working in both the Android Studio and I'm pretty sure pretty much every other code editor. Maybe a few aren't fully available yet. But anyway, in Visual Studio Code, you can just go ahead and search for extension and search for the Dart extension. And what should come up with is this right here, Dart, Dart and Flutter support. As you can see, I already have it installed. But what you would do is just click on it and then click install here. And you're going to install it, and that's going to go ahead and work for you. So now we can edit the Dart files accordingly. So now that we have our plugin installed for working with Dart files, let's go ahead and actually take a look at what is done in this application. All right, so here we are in our main.dart file. I went ahead and deleted all the comments here just so that they don't, take up too much space. We can actually read the code. So we're going to go ahead and actually close off these two classes. So we can just close my homepage and my homepage state as well. We're not going to, we're not closing them. We're just hiding them. So we're not going to pay attention to them for now. Right now, what we're going to pay attention to is this code here. So what is actually happening here? So first of all, this main method. I mean, if you've ever programmed anything in anything before, you pretty much know what a main method does. It essentially is the main place where we run our application. So right now we insert a method into main, new run app, and then new my app. So it's going to go ahead and insert that method. Now, when we do run app new my app, what that's going to go ahead and do is actually render this my app widget to the page. So right now we have class my app extends stateless widget. We're going to go over the difference between a stateless widget and a stateful widget in a second here. For now, we're going to just focus on this. Then the way sort of my app gives it back what to render is we have an override with a widget build. So it returns a widget and it just overrides build. So here it returns a new material app, which is, a built-in widget. And we give it a title Flutter demo and theme. We give it a theme, new theme data primary swatch. Colors.blue, that's just going to make the theme color blue. So as we can see here, we have the theme color as blue. And then we give it the home page, so new my home page, and then we enter the title into the new my home page. So we're going to replace this right now. We're going to replace this with a new text. So my home page is actually a widget that's created right here, so we can see it's right here. And we can delete that for now. We're going to create just a basic new text component. All right, and then in that text, we're going to insert something like my text. All right, there we go. Let's save that. Now we can actually perform a reload here. There we go, and you can see here in our app, we now get my text. So this is great and all, and it looks maybe sort of not, no, I mean, it's definitely terrible. So we can actually change this by wrapping this in its own widget. So let's actually create our temp widget here. So let's create a class temp widget. Can't type today. It's weird. Extends stateless widget. So this is going to be a stateless widget. Again, we're going to go over the difference in a second here. All right, there we go. And here we're going to do @override the widget build method. Get a build context as input. There we go. All right, so here we're going to return new scaffold, which is essentially just a wrapper around a new center class as well. Center class is going to center something, and then here for center, we're just going to do child is going to be equal to new text, and then let's just say my text here. Right here, there we go. Make sure you don't forget your semicolons. All right, and now let's go ahead and change this new text here to new. There we go. New temp widget, and let's make this capitalized, just because that's usually what you do with classes, coding conventions, naming conventions. New temp widget. There we go. All right, and there we go. So that should be good. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's refresh our application. All right, we actually got an error here. What seems to be the problem? I have a misprint typo here. Text. It's supposed to be text. New text. All right, so let's refresh that. Okay, now we got the same error, but now with just text. Instance of center. And of course, I found the problem. I forgot to put the body here. So forgot to put the selector. So that's why we actually have a problem here. So yeah, I should probably format this a little bit better. We need to put the parameter name there. So then new center and then child. There we go, like that. Just so that everything is actually in a place where we can actually sort of work with it. 1 second, let me just tab this as well. All right, there we go. So that just looks a little bit better, so that we can actually see where our errors are, because I just made a typo there, forgot that body. All right, there we go. So we're getting a body to our scaffold. That's going to go ahead and actually create sort of like a material widget. So it's actually going to add some, styling to our widget, make it look a little bit more like an actual application and not like maybe an operating system where you just drew the pixels on the screen, something like that. And then center makes it so that it'll actually just center whatever you have. So both X and Y, it'll just center it. It'll take the maximum position that it can. If you assign it, things like max height, max width, it's gonna correspondingly. That a word? It's gonna take that and then center it within those max width and max height. So yeah, that's how it works. We're not gonna go too deep into that. But if we do go ahead and save this and refresh, There we go. You can see now that it's my text and it's centered and it looks quite nice. So that's what the scaffold does. So we can actually return just a new center. So let's go ahead and remove this scaffold. So we're going to do new, we can just do new scaffold. Remove the body. There we go. So we're just going to return new center and then remove this as well. Let's save that. Let's refresh. And now you're going to see that it's the same exact thing pretty much, except we don't have the styling. So that's why we need that scaffold. That's actually what it does. So that's just something to know. Now there are a lot of ways that we can actually apply styles here, but the scaffold is sort of the basic one. It's sort of like the wrapper of everything. It's from where everything starts. All right, so now we got a general idea of how exactly this works. So essentially, we create widgets, and we have a widget tree. So everything starts, of course, here with the My App widget, essentially. Then the My App has a home page, which is this temp widget here, and it itself builds sort of a tree of widgets. So the first widget is the scaffold widget, which just applies styles to all its sub widgets, and then the sub widget of scaffold is the main sub widget is new center, which we're going to center everything, and then the child of that center is going to be new text, which is actually the widget that's going to be displayed, and that's sort of the tree of widgets in Flutter, and that's sort of a very big part of how it works essentially. Alright, so now that we know the basic idea of Flutter and how exactly the widget system works and things like that, we can actually go ahead and move on to going over what exactly all the other code is. So we can delete this, we don't need that anymore. And we can change this to new My Home Page. Of course, we are going to get an error here if we save this and run it. That is actually going to be because we didn't insert any title into here. So let's insert a title here. Title, and let's do, whoops, nope, that's of course not going to be a string. Alright, and here we're going to do, my first Flutter app. And now if we save that and re-render it, then now we actually get the actual app loaded, and we can add more. Okay, so we understand that, and we understand what this does. Hopefully you do as well. So this just sets the title of the application. This just sets the theme. We went over that, and then this just sets the home page. So we can now actually close up this component and take a look at these components here. So everything starts off with My Home Page extends stateful widget. So extending stateful widget essentially means that it is a widget that has state and that can work with state. Of course, that doesn't really tell you much. So what in the world is state? Well, essentially, a state is essentially, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It is a state, so a stateful component will have its state created. That state can actually be changed by calling the setState method in that component. So we can actually see here that we have a setState method, and we actually do set the state whenever and if down here we can see that we have increment counter right here on pressed increment counter. So we pass in this method as reference. So this is the actual button right here that we're seeing. And so whenever we press it, we call this increment counter method. So essentially, what's happening is that whenever we press the button, this whole component is sort of re-rendered, and in result, it's re-rendered with this counter plus action called. So the counter is now incremented once. So you'll see that is actually what's going on here, and that is actually how the idea of Flutter works. It's very similar to React, so yeah, I mean, that's just something to know. You'll see here that a lot of the components are pretty much the same. So we have a new scaffold here. This scaffold actually is this entire page that we're seeing here. So first of all, we have a new app bar. This is just the widget.title. So app bar is this what we can see. It's just a widget which displays some text. So that's something to know. Then we have a body here, so we're not going to go over body as of now. That's just going to be this this thing right here. And then we also have this button down here. So this is right here is this button that we're seeing. Now I'm sure that certainly you're asking yourself where we need a stateless widget and where we need a stateful widget. So let's think about this. If we have a text field, not a text field, just text. So if we have a text widget here, so we can see new text that just displays static text, there's really no point in it having state, right? I mean, why would we need to ever update that widget? So yeah, we may need to re-render that widget. So in this case, when we click plus, we do certainly re-render that widget, but we don't actually re-render it, do we? We just essentially just replace it as a whole. So it doesn't really make sense to make text. There's nothing that we can do inside the text widget to change it. So that's why text will be a stateless widget. Or in the app we had before that we created, if I can get it back. Don't know why I deleted it. That was kind of a doofus move on my part. There we go. We had a temp widget here. So let's go ahead and actually, let me revert the program back to this. Just as simple as that. Let's save that and re-render. You'll see here that we have my text. So this widget right here, there's really nothing going on, nothing updating in this widget. So there's really no point in setting the state. So there's nothing we can do to change this widget, so that's why this is a stateless widget. If we did want to have something be changed inside this widget, then it would obviously make more sense to make this a stateful widget. I mean, that's pretty much the only way to change it. So we make it a stateful widget. So that essentially is the difference between a stateless widget and a stateful widget. So you may be asking yourself, why don't we just make all widgets stateful? And then if we don't need it, we just won't use it. Well, that's because as a whole, it's best to separate it. It allows for much better organization of code. That's something that React uses a lot, both in its React Native and in its React.js, frameworks. And same thing here with Flutter. It uses stateful widgets and stateless widget. That way we have widgets that are essentially sort of immutable, but that's not entirely true since the state is actually immutable either way. Immutable with stateless widgets, so they can't be changed essentially, it can just be re-rendered. And then we have stateful widgets, which they can be re-rendered as a whole, but they can be re-rendered with just one thing changed. Essentially here we can see in my counter page, my home page state, we have a state object here. We can set the state, and we set that state to the counter ++. That's essentially that's what we set in the state, the counter to ++ it. So that is essentially how that works. Okay, so now that we know the very basics of React, let's take a look at some of the actual fields that are going on here and how the stateful widget actually works. So, I mean, the stateless widget, it's actually pretty simple. So, I mean, we got everything pretty much understood there. Let's take a look at the stateful widget and how that works. So the first thing we see here is my home page. Now, my home page as a whole is actually going to be sort of the constructor for this. And here we can see that in the constructor, we get a key object. We get an object that has a key field and a title field, this .title field. So the key will actually be automatically generated for us. So we don't actually, so let me actually change this back to my home page with the title here passed in. Always forget that we don't need that. There we go. Title. And, my title. There we go. So that is essentially what, well, let me refresh that because why not? All right, there we go. So essentially, so we see here that we have a key field. Again, that's, as you can see, we don't actually insert the key. It automatically is, so you can see up here that while we do actually insert a my title into here, a title, we don't actually insert a key. So that's because this key is automatically generated for us. So that, makes sense. We also have a final string title here, which is automatically set using this .title, so that just sets the title. And then here we do my home page state, create state equals new my home page state. So here we're actually creating the state, which will also override the build method. So that way, down here, this is actually what we're creating. So here we have a counter object. This is actually going to be our counter. And then we have a void increment counter, so I think this is pretty obvious what it does. So it just sets the state when called, and then just performs the action counter ++. That's as simple as that. Okay, so moving on, we have this widget build, which is actually already familiar to us. We've already done this, so we already went over this essentially. We have a new scaffold here, which allows for styles. It will actually use this material app here to use the scaffold and appropriately actually style our application. Then we have an app bar here. So this is what we're seeing up here with the app with the my title. So we have a title is new text widget.title. And then we have a body here. So this is the actual body that we're seeing. So here is where we actually haven't really gone over it. So we return a new center object, right? So that makes sense. I mean, we would like to center our body. And then the child is going to be a new column object. So this column object, so remember with columns, it's going to be, so this is like one column right here, then another column right here, and then another one right here. So It's hard to it's kind of hard to describe what a column is, but like right here. So this is columns are vertical, not horizontal. So right here we have a column 1 and then column 2. So essentially they go like this. So this is one column, this would be the second column, this would be the third column, and so on and so on. While a row would be like 1, 2, 3. It's kind of hard to describe. If you don't entirely know what a column is, just look it up. Okay, anyway, so essentially we create that new column, and inside this column, this is going to be this column right here. And inside this column, we have main axis alignment. So we just align the column to center. We set this column to center stuff. Then we create the children of the column. So in a column, we can actually have multiple widgets. And inside there, we have 2 widgets. Sure enough, new text. You have pushed the button this many times. And then under that, we have a new text, $_counter here. So this is actually going to refer to this counter object that we have right here. So this $ kind of like works like this. And essentially it refers to my homepage state.counter, which we get as 0. And then also here in text, we can also apply an optional value here as style. And here we just set the style to theme.of_context.texttheme.display1, which is actually automatically set as well by Flutter. So we can actually go ahead and remove this right here. There we go, and save that and refresh that. And there we go. So you can see now it actually will go ahead and remove the style, and all that style really does is make the text larger. So that's actually what that does. Okay, and then finally we have this floating action button, new floating action button, which is sort of where all the magic happens. So we assign onPressed value into the constructor here, and we give it this increment counter, a bind to this increment counter, essentially. And so it will automatically understand that's going to perform that increment counter function whenever we go ahead and click that button. And yeah, it's a floating action button, another widget built in. This tooltip here actually just describes some help text that will actually be displayed when the user long presses the button. So if we go in here and long press on the actual plus in the very middle, we should, yeah, there we go. We can see the text increments. It's just helper text to describe what exactly that button's going to do. And the child, this is going to be the new icon, icons.add. So Flutter has some built-in icons. In our case, the icon is just the plus sign. So if we remove this, we will most likely just guess something different here. Yeah, you can see here that the icon is just removed completely. So now it's just a button. But so with the icon, it's just much better. Okay, there we go. So we can't just use a plus there. I think we can just do new text. Text, and then let's try putting a plus here just to show you the difference, what a difference it actually makes. All right, and there we go. So you can see now that's kind of small. So yeah, the icon is actually just makes it a lot better. So we can just style the text, but then why would you when you could just use an icon that's built in? All right, there we go. So that is essentially all of Flutter. We've covered pretty well. I mean, definitely that's not all of Flutter. There's still a lot to cover. There's still a lot to cover. So definitely we can cover different pages. So right now we only actually have one page, the home page, my home page. Yeah, so we can, I mean, an app isn't really an app when we can't have, multiple pages, but, nevertheless, we did go over the very basics, and now you can definitely take your sort of skills to the next level. So I tried to keep everything as simple as possible. That's why I didn't really go too deep into state. So state as a whole, it's actually a pretty relatively new idea, or actually it started being popular relatively new. And so in result, there's a lot of theory behind it that I can definitely talk about, but I really wanted to keep things as simple as possible because this really isn't designed to be a full-blown course. This is just a maybe 30 to 40 minute introductory video. So yeah, that's just something to note. We can now actually close off all our classes here just to make everything as neat as possible. I really like closing classes like this because it just allows you to sort of navigate the application. When you've got a giant app with like, maybe 200, 300 lines of code, that's like the maximum for a file, by the way. It's nice to have all your classes condensed so that you can actually see exactly which one. But that's just, a general programming tip. So yeah, other than that, then I hope you enjoyed this quick start guide, and I'm going to see you next time. Till soon.